What's up YouTube? My name is Caden and you're watching Gas It Garage. And in today's video, we are back once again working on my fully custom Yerf Dog Spiderbox go-kart right here. In the last video of this project, we did a full stage 2 build on the engine with a custom intake manifold, 34mm carb, and billet rods. And I also deleted the governor, but I can't really rev this thing as high because we don't have a billet flywheel. So that's what we're going to be doing in this video. Performance 670 is the only company to my knowledge that makes billet flywheels for these things, and the reason I wasn't able to put one in is because they were out of stock at the time. But now they finally have their flywheels back in stock, so we're going to be installing one on this engine in this video so I can really get the full RPM range out of this thing. And we're going to take it for a test drive later in the video so I can actually see how much more speed we gained, because the original top speed was about 31 or 32 miles an hour. So I'm hoping we can get a little bit more top speed out of it with the higher RPM. So that said, let's get to work. Alright guys, so unfortunately I do have to work on this thing right here outside because I've got some other projects in the garage and I don't really have room for this big machine in the garage right now. So unfortunately we have to work out here in the 90-degree heat, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. It shouldn't be too much work to do the flywheel on this thing. So the first step is to remove this fan shroud right here and get the old flywheel off so I can measure the size of the ring gear, because the flywheels from Performance 670 have two different size ring gears as an option, and I have to make sure I get the right one because the flywheel is like $300 and I don't want to get the wrong one and have to send it back and delay this process even more. So let's get this flywheel off, get that ring gear measured, and I can order the new flywheel and then we can put it on once it gets here. All right, so these are the charging coils that I'm removing, and the reason I'm removing them is because the billet flywheel that I'm getting does not have charging coil magnets on the back of it, so we will not be able to use these, unfortunately. But in order to take them out, I have to take this piece of metal off right here, and I have to loosen the starter in order to pull the plug through right here. So let's go ahead and do that next, and then we will go from there. right, guys, so we've got our stock flywheel completely removed along with the charging coils, and I also had to remove the voltage regulator right here. And that's because, like I said before, the billet flywheel does not have magnets on the interior part of it to be able to run a charging system. And I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think there also may be some differences in the interior diameter of the flywheel, so there may be some clearance issues as well, but I'm not sure. So I removed these anyway because we're not going to be using them, unfortunately, which also means I won't be able to charge the battery while the engine's running, so I'm gonna have to put it on a battery charger when this thing's parked. But it is what it is. You make some sacrifices for performance upgrades. And also on the bright side, have a little bit of weight reduction as well. So now I can go measure the ring gear on the stock flywheel so I can order the right billet flywheel, and then we can put that on here. And I also put some tape around the crankshaft right here just so it doesn't rust while I'm waiting on the new flywheel. So let's go get that ring gear measured, and we also need to pop the ring gear off of the old flywheel. So let's go ahead and go do that. All right, so I had this flywheel sitting in the freezer overnight, and that will basically allow the metal to contract a little bit, and it should, in theory, make this ring gear a little bit easier to pop off. So there is some rust on this, so I'm not sure how easy it is gonna come off, but we're gonna try here. All right, it is starting to separate. And you can tell it's really cold because there's already some frost forming on it. And I really don't care a whole lot if I damage this flywheel because I'm not reusing it. And there we go. All right, now I can measure this and get the right size billet flywheel. So I'll turn the camera back on once we have the new flywheel. All right, guys, so we just got our new flywheel in from Performance 670. So the next step is we need to put the ring gear onto this little groove that's machined into the flywheel here. But in order to do that without any hammering or damaging anything, I need to put this into the freezer for a few hours, probably closer to 4 or 5 hours, and put this into a 500-degree oven to get this to expand and this to contract, so I can just drop this right on there without having to do any hammering. I did buy some valve grinding compound right here so I can lap this flywheel to the crankshaft, and then after we do all that, we can actually get this torqued down and mounted onto the engine. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the freezer, and then I'll turn the camera back on once it's out in a few hours. All right, so got the flywheel here. It just came out of the freezer, and this thing is very hot, so hopefully this will work. Yeah, it's already. Yep. All right, take 2 of trying to put the very, very hot ring gear on. We've got the ice cold flywheel, which is sitting at about 20 degrees. So hopefully this will go well. All right, it looks more even this time, so I should be able to tap it on. All right, looks like it's going on this time. Cool. Might need to put this thing in the vise and give it a little bit more persuasion to get all the way on there, but it's more even this time and it is going on. So I'm gonna hammer this all the way on off camera and then let this thing warm up so I don't freeze my hands off trying to grab this thing, because obviously it's covered in frost. And then we can go dry all the moisture off of it and lap this thing to the flywheel with this valve grinding compound right here, and then actually get it mounted on the engine and torqued down. All right, guys, so I finally got the ring gear onto the flywheel. It took a little bit of persuasion with a hammer, a little bit more than I would have liked, but it's on there. So now let's go up to the Yerf Dog and get this thing lapped onto the crankshaft, and then we can mount it and torque it down and put everything back together. So we got the billet flywheel on here, and the next step is going to be to torque it down to 55 foot-pounds. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we can get the fan and the rest of the shroud and everything back on. So we finally got this thing all the way back together, and I'm glad that's done, because that process took way longer than I thought it would. And with the ring gear, getting it on and off the old and new flywheels, I may not have done it exactly right, but it's done. So don't take this as a very serious tutorial, but you can still take some inspiration from it nonetheless. So I'm out of time to film today, but tomorrow I will start this engine up and take this thing out for a quick test ride to see if we gained any more top speed now that I can safely rev this engine a lot higher than I could with the stock flywheel. So I will see you tomorrow morning. All right, so it's the next day, and I'm gonna go ahead and get this tarp off, pump up the tires, and lube up those chains, and we can take this thing on a test drive. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pull this thing out and start it up to warm it up. And I'm gonna have the 360 camera on my helmet this time. Lock the parking brake in case this thing decides to run away on me. It shouldn't, but you never know. All right, so I looked up at the tachometer right here, and I saw 4,200 RPM, which is probably like 800 or 900 higher RPM than stock. I'm not exactly sure what stock is. Might be a little less than that, but I think we're just kind of limited by gearing at this point, because I know this engine can rev higher than that, and I eventually might want to put dual carbs on it in the future, but I think this is pretty good for right now. All right, guys, so I would call that a pretty successful flywheel install, because this thing runs great, and it actually sounds a little bit different because I think the timing is slightly advanced on that flywheel. I'm not 100% sure, don't quote me on that, but this thing still is running great, and I felt like it was a little bit faster than it was before. I think it ran about 33, maybe 34 when I drove it last, without being able to rev it high. And since my gas pedal doesn't go all the way to the floor, I can actually grab the throttle cable right here and pull it like that last quarter of a way and get maybe 200 or 300 more RPM out of it. But this definitely was faster. I still don't have a good speedometer app on my phone, but I've driven enough things to where I can kind of gauge about how fast I'm going, and that felt like about 40, which is definitely faster than this thing was before. So that's a win for that. And like I said, I got about 4,200 RPM out of it. That's the highest I saw on the tack right there. And yeah, I think that was a pretty successful drive on this thing. So thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment as always, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.